Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. This is episode 94. I'm your host, Alec. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm super excited to have somebody who I'm a big fan of as a guest for today's episode. It's VeggieWagon. How are you doing today, Veggie?
Hey, hi, Alec, and hi, everybody out there. I don't know. I'm feeling great. It's a good day.
Yay, good. Yeah, I wanted to say I just was watching some of your videos earlier today to kind of prepare for this interview episode, and I was dying at your Lemba spread like preview card video. That's got to be one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's very obvious in the video. I had a lot of fun putting that together, and that idea was in my head very early on. The short version is I had a good idea that I was going to get a preview card for the set, and I was like, oh god, I hope it has something to do with this, because this is what I'm doing regardless of what the card is.
I love that. Yeah, I have long thought that scene in particular with Denethor just munching on the most disgusting looking food is the most like horrifying part of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. And yeah, and you just like nailed the aggressiveness of that eating scene. So yeah, I loved it.
Thanks.
Of course. Yeah. So, and I kind of skipped over introducing you, but yeah, for anyone out there who doesn't know you, you do a whole bunch of really cool Magic content creation, including something, I'll list some of my favorites, but definitely want you to introduce yourself. But you do the Decked Out Commander gameplay show on YouTube, which just had a new episode earlier today, which I haven't watched yet, but I'm excited to go check it out. Yeah, and you're a Twitch streamer, and I also, like we were talking about, you do a lot of kind of like comedy / parody type of stuff that's Magic related on YouTube and TikTok. I'll hand it over to you. Is there anything I missed also that you do? I'm sure there is some stuff.
Hey, that's I think a pretty good picture. Like overall Magic comedy covers a lot. I'll do like ultra budget cosplay sometimes, and also on the Decked Out channel, we just started a new spin-off show called Commander Countdown, where we have the community vote for like their top 5 things in Commander, and then we'll comment on them, and I'll tell everyone how they're no fun, and yeah, it's a good time.
I like that. Ooh, that sounds like a really cool concept. Yeah, and if anyone out there, if you haven't seen just like the comedy shorts that are on TikTok and YouTube, definitely, like, I'll have links to those things in the episode description. You like 100% before you do anything else, you have to go watch some of those, because I was dying earlier. Okay, so I have brought you on for the episode today to interview you about one of your commander decks, and this is something I love to make episodes about, just because people who play Commander tend to put so much like love and care and effort into their Commander decks and have a lot to say about them. And I love talking to people about that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm excited to bring you on to talk about one of your Commander decks, Veggie. Really quick before we get into it, let's do my patron shout out for a randomly chosen patron at the Conclave Mentor level. And today's episode is going to be dedicated to Lunchbonks, who is a friend of mine. And so thank you very much for supporting me on Patreon. Sweet. Okay, let's get into it. So I am dying to talk about this commander because I find it super interesting. So I'll kick things off with the first question for you, which is, who is your commander and what inspired you to build this deck in the first place?
My commander is Rocco, Cabaretti Caterer. A creature that can tutor anything from your deck. You just have to pay for it. And I'm so sorry if this is one that you're really excited to talk about, because this is there's no other Rocco deck like this, and this is it probably Rocco is only the means to an end. This deck is not designed to use Rocco except for one purpose.
Ooh.
Yeah. this is my signature deck. The rule for the deck, as imposed by myself, is that the first creature that I need to tutor with Rocco every game is Tempting Wurm.
Whoa. Okay.
And yeah, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this card, I love this card so much in Commander, and I wanted to play it way more, and I couldn't. I was like, how do I do this? Oh, I'll just put a tutor in the command zone and we'll play it every game. Yeah, it's a 2-mana creature for a 5/5, which sounds great until you read the text box. When it hits the battlefield, every opponent gets to put their entire hand onto the battlefield.
Whoa. Okay, that's awesome. I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever seen Tempting Wurm before, but I'm instantly in love. I think that I was curious about if you had a secret commander in this deck just when I was looking at the deck list earlier, because that would make sense. You have a commander that can tutor for a creature card of a certain mana value. So I was kind of wondering if that was the case.
Yeah, you got it. And also, yeah, nobody's heard of this card because it's really bad. It's really bad. It was it wasn't even good by the standards of Onslaught when it was printed.
But I love it. So is this just like a pet card of yours? Where did you get this love of Tempting Wurm that made you want to build a whole deck around it?
Well, that's Onslaught, the set, is around when I started playing Magic. And even though I didn't know much about it, at that point, I could still identify that this card was not good at all. And that like intrigued me, because I was like, okay, but why would this exist? There's got to be a way to use this well, or they wouldn't make it. They wouldn't make it this bad, right? And I couldn't figure it out then, and so it's just like been a thing that's been stuck in my head for a million years. Like the one copy I guess I got of it way back when has kind of circulated through my friends that I had played with, and so somebody still had a copy of it as I started to get into Commander, and I was like, wait, I need that. And then finally, once Rocco was printed, I was like, okay, this is now we can do it.
Yes. Okay, I love that. Honestly, this type of effect is so much fun in Commander. Like this card this is kind of what Commander is all about, right? It's about having multiple friends who you're playing with and you're just doing silly stuff. And what could be sillier than you casting your commander and then just letting all of your opponents put their entire hand of cards onto the battlefield? I think that's like chef's kiss, the vibes of Commander that I want to have.
Exactly. That's the Magic that I want to be playing in my Commander games, is like everybody gets to do their thing and we don't have to wait for it. And then we have to figure out what to do about three people who are instantly threats.
And it's so fun too, because I feel like you immediately get to see everything that's in their hands, and then they kind of don't have a hand after that anymore, right? So they kind of need to build back up afterwards. I could see this just being a wild start to a game after I guess, how much mana would you need to cast your commander with this? It would be 5 mana, so up to about turn 5 is when you're getting everyone's hands on the battlefield.
Yeah, I would say it's the latest this is going to happen is turn 4, and it can happen as early as like turn 3, I guess. It's pretty consistent. It's pretty consistently turn 3.5 that this will happen.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I'm obsessed with that. I mean, we've kind of danced around this next question, but What is it about this deck that just makes it like your signature deck, the thing that you like most playing about it when you kind of sit down to get that Tempting Wurm out?
I like the experience that I see in the people that I'm playing, because first is like, okay, I'm going to play this Rocco deck, and immediately anyone that knows the card is like, oh no, like that's such a good commander, because you can build this deck in a way that is very, very good. Like CEDH Rocco is a good deck. And I'm like, and then I get to go, okay, but wait, let me show you this other card because this is my rule. And then I explain and I show them Tempting Wurm, and they're like, oh God, why would you do this? I'm like, because just trust me, it's a great time. And then usually they'll be like, okay, actually I have to switch decks. And everybody will like everybody will load up on their like most like high mana value permanent heavy deck, and I'm like,
Yep.
oh, excellent, we're ready to go. And like everybody always has a good time with it. And you like the two things that are tricky for me about, or that are important to me about Commander, are that everybody has a good time and feels like they got to do what they wanted to do with their deck, and that the game doesn't drag, because that is one challenge of the game, of like any 4-player game. But you want something satisfying but snappy, especially like I'm usually playing at like a Commander event or like on stream, and it's not as good of an experience if the game drags, and this makes sure that it doesn't.
Yeah, I totally feel you on that. I think some of the worst games of Commander I've ever played are games where somebody's playing kind of like basically the opposite of Tempting Wurm, like restricting, kind of like Staxy stuff, like restricting what you can play, how many cards you draw, kind of like you said, causing the game to drag out longer. And that's just because that isn't what I was expecting from those games. So it was kind of like, ooh, okay, when's this going to end? But Tempting Wurm is just literally that strategy, but the opposite. And I kind of love that because, I mean, just like you said, I agree. Everyone, I want to see everyone's deck be able to do a little bit of their thing and kind of like present as a threat. And you're like, whoa, that's a cool thing you did. And what better way to get there than skipping a few turns of mana ramp and acceleration to just play out everything you have. That's great. I love it. Okay, I'm already like 1000% on board for this deck. So let's get into kind of like the card choices in the deck a little more. Since you first built it, what kind of like changes have you made to this deck? What's the history behind it?
Well, at first I was like, okay, great, I get to play this card. Now, how do I make this card good? And the answer is that you bait and switch your opponents. You're like, great, you can have everything that you want, just put it right onto the battlefield, and then you blow it all up, right? Like they're suddenly all your opponents are left with no hand, no permanents. Right, but and so that's how it started. There were a bunch of board wipes, and then you kind of lock your opponents out of the game at that point. But I realized that defeats the purpose of what I like about this, because then I've just reversed everything that I just said previously. You suddenly have 3 people that can't play the game. And that's no fun. And also people started to like figure that out, and then you have the opposite problem. It's like, oh, you play Tempting Wurm, and everybody be like, no thank you, because it is a choice. You can put you put however many permanents you want from your hand on the battlefield, so people will just not play anything. And that's also no fun. So like the first big like change I made was I pulled all the board wipes out, or maybe like left 1 or 2 in that were like proactive, but and then I added that to what I would say at the beginning of the game. I was like, okay, great, first creature is Tempting Wurm. I am not like I don't run board wipes, and I'm not trying to do that. I want you to have your things. And that helped to smooth so much of so much out to get to like that commander experience that I wanted for everyone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think having played against an Avacyn deck in my kind of like local play group quite a few times, the Avacyn player definitely, at one point was playing where they would play Avacyn, give all of their stuff indestructible, and then play board wipes. So it was kind of like a similar end goal to have stuff on the board, and everyone else has nothing, like no lands. Yeah, you kind of realize that just kind of pops everyone's balloons. They're just so sad after that, and it's kind of it's really rough to rebuild after that kind of thing. So cool. Yeah, I can totally see how it would be tempting to do that with Tempting Wurm, Yeah. But yeah, I can see how for the gameplay experience that you want to have, that kind of defeats the purpose. And I love that. But I am noticing there are quite a few cards in here that let you kind of steal things from your opponents, which I bet after Tempting Wurm, there are quite a few like juicy targets for you to steal. And I really like that direction. So can we talk about some of your favorite cards that you've used to like steal the things that your opponents put out for free?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with I'll start with like the most obvious one. There is an insurrection in this deck, which yeah, I'm like, how can I not? How can I not?
Yeah.
And that is usually a card I will disclose as well as at the beginning of the game. I'm like, yeah, put them out. Know that this exists. Most people are willing to risk that one. They're like, I'll load up. This costs 8 mana. I did need a way to like finish games out decisively, because a lot of the times I could like finagle my way and like steal one thing here and there, or like just get my opponents to kind of fight each other for a while until everybody was pretty low. But sometimes it would still like kind of lock up, and I was like, well, okay, then we have a game ender button. But there are some in here that I've had a lot more fun with. There's one from Baldur's Gate, Furbolg Flutist. This one, I steal a creature for the turn, and it gains haste and myriad.
Oh, it's so cool.
So have it like, and then it's just a world of options. Like, okay, what did my opponents play, and what is going to be absolutely wild to suddenly have 4 copies of.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I think like Zealous Conscripts is a pretty sweet effect, because you don't ever know how good it'll be. But this is even cooler, being able to steal some random thing from somebody and make a bunch of copies of it and immediately attack with them. Okay, yeah, I'm obsessed with this choice. That's really cool.
I think my personal favorite version of the stealing effects in here though is Frenzied Fugue. It's steal for a turn, but on an enchantment. So you enchant an opponent's thing, and you get it on your turn, but I get it on my turn.
Oh, okay, that's fun.
Yeah. So like especially cards that kind of build themselves up get really interesting, because it's 2 players rather than amping them up. With Tempting Wurm, because it was printed before Planeswalkers existed, you cannot put one of those into play because it doesn't list that as a permanent type.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. But if a Planeswalker does happen to make it onto the battlefield, putting a Frenzied Fugue on it is so much fun, because you can plus it, then its owner can plus it, and you play this like kind of this funny little game of, okay, what abilities do I use to like that is good for me but doesn't let the other person use the ultimate ability.
Okay, that's so much fun. Yeah, I like how that totally adds a little like mini game that you have to work out with one of your opponents. In my decks, I tend to play a lot of very large and scary creatures, and just like thinking about how tempting it would be to put all of those on the battlefield, I wouldn't even be mad if you stole them. I'm like, they're doing the work, and I'm excited about it.
Right. And all of these are only none of these are true steals. They're all just borrows. The person that played it gets it back.
I feel like that's really cool, because then there's some kind of like counterplay that if I were your opponent, I could do. Like I could try to prepare for the instance where you steal one of my things. So it's not like it's an unbeatable strategy. There's like a lot of back and forth, I think, that could happen, which is really cool. I think that's really fun.
Yeah, that's exactly how it plays out.
Nice. Yeah, that's really sweet. I'm also noticing, I really love that there's quite a few instances of like goad effects, which seem really good with this. And I'm really excited to see Taunt from the Rampart as a new card that I think is going to slap really hard, especially in this deck for sure. Yeah, have you gotten a chance to play this one yet? I know the set just came out like a week or two ago, but
I have not gotten to play this card in this deck yet. It was the first card that I identified that was like, oh, that's a Tempting Wurm card. I had to grab that right away. Yeah, because I was already running like Disrupt Decorum. Yeah, because like any way to mass goad creatures was super helpful, because one, everybody would have a bunch of things, but also usually it just meant I only had Tempting Wurm on the board. Like I'd have Rocco and Tempting Wurm, and that is for sure not enough to protect me. So the goad would do double duty in making sure at least one player was then not sending it at me, who would be kind of open.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've always loved Disrupt Decorum in Commander. Every time someone plays it, it's always funny. Like there's always a cool story. And and that just goads all creatures you don't control. I guess I should say that Taunt from the Rampart is 3 a white and a red, and it goads all creatures your opponents control, but also until your next turn, those creatures can't block, which is really cool, because sometimes with Disrupt Decorum, your opponents will kind of strategize with each other to make attacks and blocks that don't kill anything if they can, and this just like totally makes it so that that's not an option, which I love to see.
Yeah, I can't wait for the first time I get to just like drop this and just watch the carnage.
So good. Yeah, so good. I think this is kind of like group hug decks are a very, very popular strategy. And this is kind of the type of group hug that I always enjoy. It's just the group hug that's not going to make the game go super long and kind of stall things out, but it'll really get some damage going. And yeah, I love to see that kind of thing. Okay, so we've talked about kind of like what the goals are for this deck when you sit down to play it. Let's talk a little bit about what this deck's weaknesses are that you've experienced when you've played it.
Well, one for sure. So I mentioned before that I had built this with board wipes. And I took those out because if they get played right after Tempting Wurm, it locks a lot of players out of the game. But I can't stop my opponents from running board wipes. So there is still that possibility that I play a Tempting Wurm and somebody is holding a board wipe, so they play well into it, and suddenly, at least 2 other players are then locked out of the game. I mean, I don't blame them, because that's a very good move. But I started adding a lot more cards like Cut a Deal and like Secret Rendezvous, and ways to help my opponents draw cards. Like I have like 2 wheel effects in the deck, just so that I can reload players' hands if that happens, or even just if I want to replay Tempting Wurm and you get two Tempting Wurms in a game, people have stuff to play.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for some reason I hadn't even thought about if another person plays a board wipe, but yeah, that totally makes sense. You aren't planning for that, but it's very possible somebody else might just go ahead and do it. So yeah, that makes sense. But I like how you have ways to kind of help build back up from that. And I've always enjoyed effects like Cut a Deal and Secret Rendezvous, where you do get an effect, you get to draw cards, but you can point out the player who seems the most behind, or that maybe you want to kind of start an alliance with and have them get some cards or a bonus as well. So yeah, that seems right at home in this deck when you're trying to, for one, I bet you can make some pretty good deals with people just from Tempting Wurm and how awesome that is. But yeah, adding these cards makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you you kind of you really need to make some deals after you play it anyway, because you're the only player that doesn't have a massive board.
Gotcha. Yeah. So do you ever kind of try to get any deals out there beforehand? You're like, okay, I could go Tempting Wurm right now and you can play all your stuff, but maybe like be nice to me for a little while. Do you ever try to do that, or do you kind of just let the cards speak for themselves?
What I've learned is you almost never have to do it on the first one, because everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got some stuff, I'm ready, I'm good. And then once everybody's played their stuff, nobody cares about me because I'm the only non-threat. So for the most part, my opponents will be focused on each other first, and I don't really have to worry about drawing too much heat. It's the second time that you play Tempting Wurm that is the one where you need to make some deals, because for sure there's somebody that's like, please play that right now, and somebody else that's like, no, I'm out of cards, like I'm doing great. No Tempting Wurm right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think generally in games I've seen where somebody is doing some kind of like group hug thing, it's true, like they can really fly under the radar. What happens sometimes is somebody will have something that's like a flyer that draws a card when they attack somebody or when they hit a player. So they'll just send those like little things at the person who's the least threatening. So sometimes their life total can go down just based on them being kind of open to things like that. But for the big stuff, I think they're not going to like send their huge army at the player who just gave them all these things. There's a little bit of a kind of social contract, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you just gave them all of these tempting gifts, so why would they turn those against you so soon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're in a room where 3 people are holding guns at each other, and then a 4th person is just happens to be also standing in the room like holding a worm, then the 3 with the guns are not going to be shooting at the guy with the worm.
Yep, I love this analogy, and that's 100% an apt analogy for this situation. I have noticed you've got a couple of things kind of like ghostly prison, which seem right at home here. So if you have that out, then it at least gives a kind of like in-game incentive for your opponents to not be attacking you with those big things as well. And I bet that helps sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean, because at a certain point, somebody wants to swing their big stuff at you, whether it's because of like the reason that you said, where they'll get some effects out of it, or just, you know what, I don't have any further use for you, might as well be dead, or maybe somebody's been eliminated already, and it's getting to that point. So yeah, with like ghostly prison and windborne muse, and then of course the goad effects, that's my layer of protection once people have decided, oh, maybe we should kill Veggie.
Gotcha. Yeah, that totally makes sense. In this category, I also am a huge fan of Deflecting Palm. I had a Queen Marchesa deck for so long, since she came out as a card, and it always ran Deflecting Palm, and just like the feeling of getting somebody with that card there's few things that feel better than that in Commander. Yeah, and this, just really quick, this is a red and a white for an instant, and it says the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, Deflecting Palm deals that much damage to that source's controller. So you just flip their damage right back around, and usually it's a lot.
Mm-hmm. And like nobody ever sees it coming. Nobody's thinking about Deflecting Palm.
Yeah, well, I think my playgroup in person has gotten got by Deflecting Palm enough that they think about it. But outside of that, generally there's no way people will see this one.
Right. Even better at that point, because you're just like, I have a red and a white open. This could be Deflecting Palm.
Oh yeah, it's really funny when things like that start happening. I love it so much. And then there's the it's slipping my mind right now, but the 2 white for the instant that like bounces all of your opponent's attackers back to their hand. Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up. It'll come to me in a second. But that's one that our playgroup also just fears, and I think it's so funny that that's just become like a thing, along with deflecting palm. That's just the kind of thing that like you got to swing that damage back around and get people's life totals going down, and things like that are so much fun. Okay, yeah, so let's get into my next question, which is, what are some notable cards in this deck that like fill generic roles of the deck, like card draw, but are maybe a little more spicy, that fit into this deck really nice?
One of the main things that I have to do early is ramp, because I want to be able to play Tempting Wurm as soon as possible. And so you got your basic like mana dorks and rocks, but I do have a personal favorite. I run Cursed Mirror in this, which is a red. It's a red mana rock, but it also can enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield.
Ooh.
And that effect lasts until end of turn, and it has haste, so it's good before if I have to use it to ramp into Rocco, but it's excellent afterward because it's another like copy effect for anything on the board.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. It's good early and good late, and it'll do like all the things you want to do at those points of the game. Yeah, that's really sweet in this deck.
Oh, I haven't gotten to play any of the Lord of the Rings cards in it yet, but I also have a copy of like the One Ring.
Ooh, yes.
Because protection from everything is super useful if everything is really scary on the board.
Okay, yeah, that is perfect. I have been trying to force this card. I played it on Arena a little bit, since I haven't had a chance to play it in person yet. And I'm thinking about the burden and draw card thing so much, I always forget about the protection, but it's probably the best part of this card. You just get to like Teferi's protection yourself for a turn, and also draw a bunch of cards later. Like, yeah, that seems, especially in this deck too, where you really want that kind of protection, that seems great.
Yeah, and it does happen to work. I have like one or two effects in the deck that return permanents to my hand, primarily so that I can replay Tempting Wurm. But I could use those effects on the One Ring, since it needs you to cast it to get that ability. So I can like loop multiple turns where I have that protection.
Ooh, okay, that's really cool. Yeah, see, that's the kind of thing, if I were looking through your deck list, I could see using White Mane Lion to return Tempting Wurm to your hand, but yeah, having that additional ability to have the One Ring and like recur its effect. Yeah, I just wouldn't be able to know that kind of stuff unless I was talking to you about it, but that's a really cool effect. Okay, I just remembered, it's Settle the Wreckage is that card I was trying to think of. Yeah, that one's just, it's similar. It's like all the attacking creatures get bounced, and then the player attacking gets to get a bunch of basics for them. Yeah, I just love effects like that. There's like Ink Shield also, and things like that. I'm a huge fan of those like reactive strategies.
Yeah, God, what I would do to be able to run Ink Shield in this deck.
Oh yeah, that'd be so good.
I wish.
My next question is, what is your MVP of the deck, or like the most synergistic card? And I think it's probably Tempting Wurm, but Tempting Wurm aside, what do you think kind of is a card that just makes everything in this deck work really nicely?
Yeah, because Tempting Wurm doesn't really count because it's like it is the hidden commander.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know if it is the number one MVP, but one that is repeatedly like surprised me at how good it is for this has been Glunch the Bestower.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Because it already is like kind of on theme for group hug, but it does all of the things that I need at every point during the game. So like I can play it early. Like let's say I play a Mana Dork and I play it on turn 2. If I give myself the treasures, that means on turn 3 I can Rocco for Tempting Wurm.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then if I play it after Tempting Wurm, all of these effects are useful in some way. Like having a player, like everybody's going to have a target to put counters on a creature. everybody's going to have hands that are nearly empty, so I can refill those. And then I can give myself the mana to then continue to play the cards that I still have.
And you'll have a 0/5 flying blocker in case your opponents are using their big creatures that are out now to come at you.
Right. Yeah. That's so it does everything that I want, and I'm happy to see it early or late.
Yeah, I've played against decks that have had Glunch as the commander, and those have always been so fun as well. And this is just kind of like utilizing those abilities even a little bit better, using Tempting Wurm, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say, but I am in love with this. So yeah, that's awesome. I like it. Okay, good choice. Okay, so my next question is, do you have any pet cards that you just cannot resist playing when you're playing this deck?
I mean, aside from the big one,
yeah.
I really love Mimic Vat.
Ooh.
That's a card that I end up playing in a lot of decks, just because it's a generally powerful ability anyway. So like something whenever a creature dies, you can exile it, and then just for 3 mana and tapping it, you make a 1-turn copy of that creature. So like you can benefit from like creatures with ETBs. There's like token synergy. There's a lot of different decks that can use it, but it's nice here because you have a bunch of huge targets. Because this triggers for any non-token creature dying. So if one of my opponents like kills one of the big threats that another opponent has, I can be like, great, I'm gonna be able to make a copy of that every turn.
Oh, that's incredible. I did want, if we didn't get around to it, I wanted to mention Mimic Vat and Mirage Mirror. I feel like is kind of a little bit of a similar vibe where you're copying, like making copies at a moment's notice, and it can, change every turn of whatever your opponents are doing. And yeah, those are cards, especially Mimic that I always like try to force in decks, and then they end up getting cut as like the 102nd card or whatever. But yeah, it seems amazing in this deck, especially where you're kind of boosting the game forward, and I'm sure stuff goes into the graveyard like pretty shortly after Tempting Wurm comes out. And yeah, it seems awesome. You're like, okay, now it's in there, not hurting anyone, so I'm gonna make a copy of it every turn.
I mean, also, yeah, Mirage Mirror is a is a wild card. It's like, especially when you get those turns where you're like copying different things multiple times in the turn. You're like, great, all right, I'm going to use that ability, and then I'm going to activate it. Great, and then I'm going to make it a copy of this creature. I'm going to swing with it. Okay, great, you didn't block. I'm going to copy this other creature that like does an ability. Like that is a very fun and underrated card.
Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah, and I love to see it here because it's just throwing it in a random deck is a good time, but it's hard to, like, other decks don't want their opponents to be playing good stuff to copy, right? Like, you don't, you're trying to destroy those things or like get around them somehow. But yeah, this deck's totally the opposite. It's your opponents are playing big stuff and you are helping them with that, and then making copies of it. And Sculpting Steel is also, it's kind of similar. It's a 3-mana artifact that when it enters the battlefield, as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. That's one that I'm always thinking about, but I've never actually played it. Is that something that you've gotten some pretty good value out of?
You have no idea the feeling that comes over you when you get to Sculpting Steel and copy a Blight Steel Colossus.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it always overperforms, like, because every player can be running big artifacts, and there are so many commander staples that are big artifacts, so you are very, very likely to have a big hit on the board. Yeah, because normally this is like played in a deck to copy one of your own things, like, an artifact like strategy, but here I'm like, nope, let's see what you got. Oh, great. Yeah, Portal to Phyrexia, cool. I'll have that too. Like,
Ooh. Okay. I think, yeah, you've got me convinced. And yeah, also thinking about if the worst case scenario is that you just use it to copy a Soul Ring, like a 3-mana Soul Ring is still better than Worn Power Stone. So that's like not the worst. If the worst is a Soul Ring and the best is a Portal to Phyrexia, okay, yeah, you've convinced me.
yeah. I'm just realizing this now too, is with the One Ring in the deck, I can play Sculpting Steel as a copy of the One Ring, which will trigger the ability and get rid of the original copy if I wanted. Let's say it's like it's got a bunch of counters on it that are dealing a lot of damage to me every turn. I can reset it and get the ability again.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. Yeah, no, that's really clever because one of them will die because they're legendary. But yeah, you get the protection effect, which is like really what you want. And then, yeah, and that's the thing, having played the One Ring very little, and only on Arena, the burden counters, like they get pretty intense after a while. And yeah, dealing like 6 or 7 damage to yourself does, you start to feel it. And using Sculpting Steel to reset that is brilliant. Okay, yeah, I love that. That's good. Sweet. Okay, so I'm really excited for this next question, which is always one of my favorites, but it's, what has been one of your favorite in-game moments that you've had while you were playing this deck?
I think all of them are like pre-game. It's always showing somebody what, like, it's always announcing the deck. There's tons of in-game moments, which I guess is really the question, but and the majority of those are like somebody being like, oh my god, I have the nuts, like I have exactly like the cards that I want, I'm gonna drop them on the board, and then me going, great, I'm gonna borrow those pieces and win the game right now.
Yep.
I think there was one where I just had the perfect lineup. Like, I don't like every game to be this way, but it was just like the ideal, like, turn 1 Mana Dork, turn 2 Glunch, turn 3 Rocco, Tempting Wurm. 3 players got exactly what they wanted. Then, like, the next at the end of that turn, get the treasures from Glunch. The end of the next turn, get the treasures from Glunch, and then turn 5 Insurrection, take everybody's stuff and win.
Ooh.
So like that's just knowing that this ridiculous deck has that potential and that has happened before is very is one of my favorite things. But I think my favorite moments of all time with this are showing it to, like, I think it was one of the Magic cons, like the first game of the day, I sat down with Sheldon Menery, and
nice.
And I was like, I'm gonna play this deck, and he goes, "What is this card?" How and yeah, I and then I drew it opening hand, so I got to play Tempting Wurm on turn 2, and this game is off to the races. And like, you can see it on some other like Commander shows as well. Like, it was the first deck that I played on Decked Out. I played it on like Elder Dragon Hijinks with Ailey and Olivia, and I got that exact reaction, like, what is this card? That for sure is my favorite moment playing the deck, is seeing the wheels turn of like, wow, this is awful, why would you play this? Okay, I need to switch to a deck that's going to be able to take advantage of this. Now we got to figure out how this game is going to go.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, like, I love talking about the in-game moments that happen, but I love that you brought up how cool the pre-game discussions are with this deck, because it's so satisfying when you build a deck that is really cool and unique, and you like describing it to people in the pre-game conversation, and you can kind of see like their eyes light up. They're like, okay, what can we do? What can I play against this? I'm so excited to see it happen. And that's got to be one of the most satisfying feelings, especially if if they're new people who you haven't played with before, or if you're meeting people at a convention. I could see that just being so cool and fun, and kind of what we're here for, right? Is to show off our creative and unique decks to each other.
Yeah, exactly. I like the experience that this deck presents for the people that I get to play with. And also oftentimes those are very different. Like even the co-host for Decked Out, MTG Nerd Girl, has had to play against this deck multiple times. And is also relatively new to Commander as a whole. So it's just like, why would you ever why would you ever do this? This is awful. And then like the first game on the show, like spoilers, I play it very early, and she goes, okay, I guess here's Jin Gataxias.
Oof.
and then that game ended up being fantastic. Like we had a lot of fun because, yeah, you know what? A turn 2 Jin Gataxias is a big problem, but it is not quite as big of a problem if everybody also gets the things that they have in their hand.
Yeah.
And then we had like another game later. It may have been the Elder Dragon Hijinks one where I played the deck again, and I think there was a miscommunication between the two of us, and she had chosen a deck that was mostly instants and sorceries. So she's like, wait a minute, oh no. and so she's not able to put anything on the board, and yeah, it's
Yeah, I love that there are cards like that are old, and since they're creating new card types and things every once in a while, that just like Tempting Wurm's not going to be putting battles onto the battlefield, and I think you can kind of play around with things like that. It makes really funny situations. So yeah, that's good. I like that. I think that as I've been trying to get into going to conventions more and playing with random people who attend those, decks like this are just so much more appropriate, I guess, for things like that. Like I have a lot of decks that are kind of honed to be aggressive with my play group that I play with every week, but that it won't be the same kind of setup if I'm just playing with people who I just met. But decks like this, where it's kind of built around and it gets a lot of power from whatever your opponents are doing. So I could see it like very easily like matching their power levels, which is a hard thing to navigate, like how to match your power levels with people. But if your deck kind of does it naturally, I think that's a really cool way to get games in that are really good and really fun for everyone at events like that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm ranting now, and I'm kind of inspired by this deck.
I mean, it is the ideal, it's the ideal like Magic event deck to me, because everybody's gonna have a very fun and unique time. Like people remember the Tempting Wurm guy, and it also ensures that your games are snappy. Like you want to be able to play as many satisfying games as possible with people, because your time is limited at when you go to a convention or something, and this gives you that no matter what. And then also helps to like you said, fix the problem of like having to get power levels the same. Like this will turn the like the Timmy like 6 power, like this will break a precon. Like
right,
if they yeah, oftentimes it's the higher power decks that can't use it as well, because they're playing a bunch of instant sorceries, or they don't have those big Timmy cards in there, because the high power games they're playing, they're not resolving those spells or like getting that mana.
Totally. But yeah, it's kind of the precons that'll drop a Zetalpal super early, right? And then just win. Yeah, I love that. And I think what you said about games being snappy is also an important consideration, because I have had like a day at a convention where I get there in the morning and start playing Commander. I've played 2 games of Commander, and all of a sudden it's dinner time somehow. I'm like, I haven't eaten in 8 hours and I've only played 2 games. I don't know exactly what happened, but yeah, I do think having satisfying games that are fun for everyone, but that aren't super, super long, so you can, do all the other stuff that you need to do is an important thing to think about.
I don't need to spend half my day ramping from turn 1 to, turn 4. Like we can skip through all of that.
Who needs that? Just play your hands out. We'll see what happens.
There we go.
So good. I love that. Okay, we've made it to my final question for you, which is, what advice would you give to players out there looking to build this deck who maybe have been inspired to build a deck like Tempting Wurm, or just kind of stealing your idea and playing a deck all around Tempting Wurm? What would you say to them?
I can think of 2 things in particular. One, don't expect to win. This deck is a lot of fun, and certainly has ways to win. Like, hey, maybe you just hit that insurrection line and win the game on turn 5, but that's rarely going to happen. Usually, letting all 3 of your opponents put everything from their hand onto the battlefield means that you will lose. If that is something that is important to you in Commander, that you have a good chance of winning, then this is not the best deck for you. But if you enjoy having that slim chance, like oh my god, I've only won 3 times ever with this deck, but every time it was out of nowhere, and just the wildest setup imaginable, and you will remember all of those. This is the deck for you. And then the other thing is, if you do make a deck like this, and play it against people that you don't know, make sure to discuss exactly what this is looking to do during your Rule 0 conversation, because we're talking about it and it sounds very fun for everyone, but it's not always how everybody wants to play this game, or at least it's not always the way that people are planning to play this game. If I were just walk into a pod and be like, great, I'm going to play Rocco, that the people are going to expect something very different. You can have some pretty feels bad moments if somebody chooses a Spellslinger deck. They're likely going to feel like they didn't really have a chance in that game because they get no value off of the Tempting Wurm. Again, it's just that this is a very this defines how the game is going to go, and that is something that you should include in your Rule 0 conversation. Usually what I will say is, I'm going to play Rocco Cabaretti Caterer. This is my signature deck. The rule that I've imposed for myself is that every game, the first creature I have to tutor out, which I will do as fast as possible, is Tempting Wurm. I will show everyone the card, and then I'll say, I don't run any board wipes, and I am not looking to gotcha with this. I want you to have all of your cool stuff on the board. I might borrow it at certain points, and I do run Insurrection in this deck as a way to win. So keep that in mind, but otherwise, I'm going to play this as fast as possible. You get your cool stuff, and hopefully I can navigate in between the 3 of you being massive threats.
I like it. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, the initial conversation, the Rule 0 conversation, it's kind of just a moment for you to be like, here's my commander. And then if, the expectation is their commander will run how most decks with that commander run. You can expect what to see based on the EDH rec page or something like that. Right. But yeah, so I like how you have kind of a speech, right? You have a much more detailed look into what your strategy is beyond just the general one sentence. And yeah, and that makes sense that you kind of need to set the expectations for what playing against this deck will be like, and making sure everyone is playing decks that can navigate that. I think that's something we do in our my in-person play group quite a bit, is rather than just saying, here's the deck I want to play, it's here's the deck I want to play, and I also want to kind of see how it interacts with your deck over there and how that one plays. And I think getting into that is a great way to set your expectations and have a really fun game at the end.
Yeah. Honestly, I'd I more generally give the advice to anybody: do that in your in your rule zero. Just go out and say, hey, this is what my deck does. Here are the cards that are notable, and like kind of what you should be prepared for, because that usually encourages the other people to do the same, which just makes for better Commander games. If you set the tone of like, hey, I'm going to be open with like my strategy and with what I'm playing, then everybody gets more information and is encouraged to do that as well.
Totally. Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think that's great advice for this deck and just in general for any deck. So yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. Okay, cool. I think I've never learned this much about how I should be communicating about my deck more than when talking about Tempting Wurm. So thank you very much for that. I think it's really important, and just thinking about decks like this that are weird and that have hidden commanders, I think are really special decks. And and I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to let me ask you a whole bunch of questions about it.
No, thank you. I'm honored. It's I mentioned before we started recording that you'd probably have to stop me from talking, and that's me in general for most topics, but like especially this deck.
Yeah, I have a deck I built recently that's I feel very similarly about. It's a secret commander deck with Grozoth as the commander. Are you aware of Grozoth?
Oh. You have excellent taste. I love Grozoth.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's a deck I've been trying to make work forever. And in the last year, the Wizards of the Coast has basically doubled the amount of 9-drops that are out there. And all of a sudden it's actually pretty good and pretty fun. And yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. As soon as somebody starts asking me questions about that deck, I'm like, okay, I got to tell you everything there is to know about this weird deck. But that's why I like to do this podcast, so I can record it, and because I know other people enjoy hearing and talking about that kind of thing as well. As we kind of like sign off, would you like to plug any of the stuff that you've got going on and coming up?
Sure. You mentioned at the beginning of the episode that we just released a new episode of Decked Out. You should find us on YouTube. Just search Decked Out MTG, and you'll find our Commander gameplay show. And I think we're one of the best out there. I do all of the editing, and I try to go for a nice like mix of the best parts of the different shows that are out there, and we have some really fantastic guests. So that's my big plug. Check our show out. It's really great.
Yeah, yes, totally agree. And I'll have links to that, to Decked Out and also your other stuff in the episode description, so y'all can just go click it really easily and get watching. I'm looking forward to checking out your new episodes, and I've loved a lot of the previous episodes of Decked Out that I've seen. So yeah, I'm super impressed also that you're doing all the editing, because that takes forever to edit that kind of stuff. So yeah, amazing job doing all of that.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, no, I can like, I'm just over here editing just audio, and that takes me forever. I have huge respect for anyone that also does video, especially gameplay and stuff like that, where you have so much stuff going on. Okay, well, yeah, one last thank you very much, VeggieWagon, for coming on and letting me talk to you so much. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
One last thing before we sign off is I always shout out every patron at the All That Glitters level, and currently we have one. So thank you very much, Jeff, for being a patron. I appreciate it so much. And if you want to check out some of the Faerie Conclave's links, I'll have those in the episode description below as well. But yeah, I think that's all. So check out VeggieWagon's deck. I'll have the deck list down in the description. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you all next time.